And even the most effective businesses in companies, they track and measure returns on everything they put in their business. You have a liability section and you have an asset section, right? And whatever you bring into your business is going to fall on one side or the other. And then I started asking people about their boards in the same context, and I would just get blank stares. Not who's on it, because when I ask people, even today, when I ask people that question about their boards, I'm like, well, how does your board perform? Describe it for me, right? What's the return that it's generating for you? I usually get a list of people and how impressive their backgrounds are, rather than the return on our board was, 5x, 10x, 15x, whatever it is. Because most boards don't know. They just don't know. Most companies don't know.
Today on the One Away Show, I am joined by Bob Arciniaga, someone who left behind a meaningful, high-powered Wall Street career in search of something more grounded and meaningful. In his 20s, he was the top algorithmic trader managing millions, but a quiet realization began to surface. The systems he was building weren't giving him the life he wanted. In this episode, we explore the moment Bob stepped away from the chase, the values that guided the pivot, and how he's now bringing structure and clarity to the boardroom in a way that puts people first. In a conversation about reinvention, perspective, and choosing purpose when the path isn't clear. Let's dive in. Bob, welcome to the One Away Show.
It's great to be here. Thanks, Bryan.
Yeah, great to have you here, and have super enjoyed our chats and getting to know you. So I'm very excited to dive in with you. Bob, what is the one away moment that you want to share with us today?
Okay, I think the one away moment. It's funny how I love how you term that. By the way, it's a great way to term it. I didn't really realize it at the time, but I guess looking back, it definitely was. And that was when I decided to move on from my Wall Street kind of career to being more of an entrepreneur, I guess, and going back to my entrepreneurial roots that I grew up with our family business. But it was just making that leap was pretty scary at the time. I guess I didn't really think about it that much, but here I was, a younger person, just getting married, just got married. And had, even at a young age, had a very successful career as an algorithmic equity and commodities trader for a number of Wall Street firms. And I decided to leave the hedge fund that I was a partner in and head trader of for the desk, and decided to just go off on my own and not have anything to do with trading or Wall Street or anything like that anymore. So for me, that was the big moment. Pretty scary because there was a big cliff there. Didn't really see it. Didn't really know where I was going. When you're a trader, you don't, at least at that level, especially an algorithmic trader like I was, you don't have a lot of skills, transferable skills, in the marketplace. So, I had to start all over, and I guess no one was really going to give me a job at the time, even though I didn't really need one anyway. So I had to do my own thing.
Got it. Okay. I'm sure extremely scary. And I'm sure your wife was like, what are you doing? Maybe not, but well, I want to get there. But before we kind of go into leaving and kind of figuring out what's next, I'm just curious, kind of, one, remind me of your age when you started that job. And then two, I would love to understand, like, what brought you into algorithmic trading in the first place? Like, why that career path?
That's a really good question. I didn't know that was going to be my career path, but after college, a friend of mine had started a small hedge fund and invited me to come and learn the trading business. And I was leaving. I had been in our family business for a long time, and I had to make a choice at that time of either going through the family business track and maybe someday taking over for my dad, or just setting my own course. And I was a lot younger back then, so I went down that road. And this friend of mine that that I grew up with. Actually, we were in each other's weddings and all that. I've known him since we've been friends since we were about 4 years old. He started really a black box shop. They were building pattern recognition systems, and we started literally in one of their backyards trading. At that time, we were high volume trading S&P contracts, which was unusual at that time. Day trading wasn't even a thing, and we were literally day trading S&P contracts based on different programmatic type trading systems. So that's how I got involved with it, totally by accident. Learned that business, loved it. Super exciting, especially when you're 24 years old. Super awesome. You don't make a lot of money at first, and then after a few years of gutting it out and super long hours, eventually you start really making a lot of money, especially at that age. Yeah. So and then, but when I met my wife and we got married, I realized that's not really a lifestyle for to raise a family. So that's why I left.
Got it. No, I totally understand. I mean, I've heard about the industry. I mean, you told me a little bit about it. I met somebody who was an algorithmic trader in New York a few years ago. Anyways, it's definitely a very interesting industry. One of the things that, sounds like it was a financially prosperous career path. And it was, you were making a lot of money at a young age that most people, would dream to make. You said something to me when we talked beginning of or end of last week about, while it was great money, there wasn't a whole lot, if I heard you correctly, there wasn't a whole lot of skills that you really kind of developed. So not only were you leaving a lot of money on the table, but there was maybe a gap in just kind of skilling, can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, look, I mean, the way, again, this is a long time ago, so I don't know if things have changed that much, but when you're trading and you have a proprietary account, in other words, the firm has allocated a certain amount of their total capital to you as one of the head traders, and you're responsible for that and growing that pool of money. There's a lot of pressure, but it's really interesting how, well, at least how I did it anyway. I didn't even think about the money anymore. It really became all about the systems and maximizing the systems and optimizing the systems. It's a weird thing in my brain, the way it works that way. And I didn't even think about the money. I didn't think about the returns. My partners, trust me, were very concerned about the returns and everything else. I was more interested in if we could figure out a way to get from, in a historical average, because we would always back test all of our systems before we'd actually put money to it. And there was a whole process that we went through. But in the back testing, if we could get it to 60 to 70% correct, historically speaking, then what if we could get it in real life to 75, 80%? And if we can get it to 80%, why not 85? And if we can get it to 85, why not 90? And if we can get it to 90%, why not 100% of every trade we make makes money, right? And so that ended up being my driving factor, is to figure out how to get something to perfection. It was never going to happen. But I had it in my brain for some stupid reason that I actually could. Sure. And that was the driving force. And unfortunately for me, that ended up becoming more important than anything else. And that was, at least at my point, at that point, being so young, I'm surprised I had this thought that maybe that's not a good thing.
Interesting. So what led to, so to build on that, first, thank you for just sharing so vulnerably. Sounds like what you're saying is like, you kind of got to a point internally where you really started to just question, like, is making all this money just to like optimize how much money I can make on a trade, like really kind of worth it at the end of the day?
Yeah, I think what hit me was at some point, I went on a 4-day trading binge where you could, at that point, it was kind of a new thing. You could go from market to market to market to market and follow the, follow the clock, right? So when New York would be finished up, then trading in Asia was opening up. When Asia was done, then you go to Europe and so on and so forth. I think for me, the issue became really is it was really at the time, my girlfriend, now my wife, my fiance at the time, she told me, look, I'm not going to live this way, because I went on a 4-day binge where I maybe slept 3 to 4 hours a night. And I was just nonstop I was trying to literally prove out one of our systems that I was super excited about. And I got really caught up in it, and I didn't even realize that it had been 4 days.
Wow.
Just trading, and just trying to figure out how to optimize it in real time. And that's when I realized maybe I had a problem.
Interesting. So, I mean, I have an important question on this, but you were making, I mean, you shared with me like north of $1 million a year, and in your like 20s. Is that right?
That was not unusual back then. Yeah, absolutely. That was not unusual back then.
Wow, I should switch jobs. No, I'm just kidding. So
I don't know if it's the same anymore. That was a long time ago.
no, I'm kidding. I love what we do. But Bob, so my question to you were you more scared of like who you were turning into and the problem that you had, or like the beautiful wife and family that you were like looking to build and seeing that at risk? Like, what was more the motivating kind of force to say, hey, maybe this isn't the path that I should be going down?
It's a great question. I still remember the day that it happened. When I walk in a normal day, when I walk in the morning, I had, at the end of the day, all of my trades had to go through this process, and somebody, obviously, we had a whole back office that did all that. And when I would show up in the morning, they would give me this pile of papers that had all the trades from the previous day and how they were allocated. Anyways, point is that I was going through it. I never looked at those. And for some reason that day, I looked at this massive report, and I was just flipping through it just to see like, hey, who are these accounts? Because it would show that this is where the accounts were allocated to. And literally, it was all institutional dollars. So they were big institutions that we were trading for. And I happened to look at one, and it was the California State Teachers. And I have 3 aunts and a grandmother that at that time were teachers at LA Unified School District. And it hit me. This is real people's money. And I had never thought about whose money it was. I had never thought about the money itself. I had gotten so caught up in just what the system was doing, and that kind of threw me for a loop. I'm like, this is my grandma. It's not my grandmother's money, but she was part of that pool of capital. And I'm like, and I'm not, and I wasn't taking it I wasn't even thinking about that. And it just kind of threw me for a loop. Like, wait a minute, this is real. Like these are real people. And this is a teacher's or a firefighter or, somebody else that's worked their ass off their whole life to have this money. And I'm treating it like I didn't even think about it. And it just really bothered me from that point on. And it really did bother me. And between that and the fact that I did, from a personal perspective, I did want to have a family. And I didn't think that, and I had met the right person. And unfortunately, my wife, at that point, luckily for me, my fiance, now my wife, had told me, look, I'm not signing up for this train. She's a lot younger than me, which is great. And she wanted to have a family. So did I. That's why I think we've been a perfect match. And yeah, I chose her over a career. I think next. But it was time. It was good time. It wasn't just her. It was a lot of factors that went into it. And part of it was, like I said before, the idea that I wasn't thinking about what I was doing properly.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of chilling, right? You kind of realize like the impact of your what you were doing in the world and maybe the negative consequences of if not handled with care, and kind of could see that in a visceral firsthand way. What's interesting, Bob, about you is, and I'll move on this topic shortly, but you have this, I mean this as a compliment, like this softer, like it just feels like this warmth to you, right? Like, and to me at least, you don't seem like this like hard driving New Yorker type right on Wall Street, but there's this emotional intelligence to you. Do you think that has been developed over time, or do you think you had that back then, but it was a bit masked just by the pursuit of the career and money?
I mean, I wish I could say I was that insightful. I think I've gotten a lot more insightful as I've gotten older. I think that's what generally people do. It is a little surprising to me at that time that I was having those thoughts, because mentally I was probably, I don't know, 15 at the time. And so the fact that I was actually having those thoughts in a coherent and an insightful way, even kind of surprises the shit out of me right now. Because trust me, those were fleeting thoughts at that point. I was thinking about all kinds of other things that made no sense whatsoever. And so, yeah, I mean, maybe it was a sign of something to come, as far as, my ability to just kind of be that kind of introspective type person. But trust me, at that point, at that age, I definitely was the furthest thing from being introspective.
Got it. Okay. Just an observation and curiosity on the other side. All right. So you left. We're finally back to where we started. So you left, and it was time to double down on wife, future family. What was racing through your mind? Like, did you have a plan? What was next? Like, what was kind of going on inside of kind of Bob's future?
I had no plans. None. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know what I was going to do. And again, it was I left everything right after we had gotten married. So I was probably like 32 at the time. And I think I played golf for like two weeks straight every day. And then that got old pretty quick. And I mean, I didn't necessarily have to work at that point. It wasn't like something I needed to do, but I didn't think I would want to be the stay-at-home dad. First of all, my wife really wanted that job, being a stay-at-home mom. So I didn't think we were going to need to both do that. And so I remember at some point my wife kind of telling me, again, the way my brain works, I was having coffee one morning and I was watching my wife clean up the kitchen. And again, not being very introspective and being newlyweds, I didn't know I was supposed to help at that point. And so I was just watching her clean up the kitchen when I should have been helping. And as she was doing it, I really, again, the way my brain works, I was watching her do it, and it was really inefficient how she was going about it. And something I've learned is to, kind of put that filter in. Back then, I didn't really have a filter. Maybe I don't have a very good one now, but it blurted out to me telling my wife that I thought there was a much more efficient way for her to clean the kitchen. Because I was literally watching her. I'm like, that's not efficient. Like, you should have started here and then went there. And she just looked at me, and God bless her heart, this is just the amazing woman I married. She looked at me and said, she didn't yell at me. She didn't, which, trust me, I think she would today. But at that point, she was like, you need to go do something else. We need to find you something to do, some job, something. You need to do something. And so that's when I kind of went back to our family business a little bit, because who else was going to hire a former trader that, at that age. So I kind of went into the family business, and then our business launched, at some point from there.
Got it. Wow. Okay. Yeah, it sounds like she handled that moment with a lot of care.
Yeah, she wouldn't. I don't think she would have been that nice nowadays. But back then she was. Yeah,
So
she's
you think she
got more patient. Maybe she's got a lot more patient now. But back then she just knew how to. Yeah, trust me. I think I know what she was thinking. It wasn't. It wasn't what she said.
maybe your EQ's been born from more time with her.
Right, exactly.
There's a high positive correlation here. That's very sweet and very these good stories here. So um, I guess well we'll touch on the efficiency part as we move forward. But so you went to the family business, trying to kind of maybe not at a crossroads, but really just trying to kind of figure out kind of where to find the next thing to do. Um, I mean, tell me about that. I definitely want to move into the board side of this conversation because I think that's fascinating. But so kind of help me understand kind of going into the family business and kind of what happened and kind of what led you to everything you've been doing, the last, decade on the board side of things.
Yeah, when I started working with family again, we had a board that was moderately effective, mostly ineffective. And I remember at the time, again, kind of funky how my brain works. I went into a boardroom meeting and I walked out, and it was super inefficient. I didn't think it was very effective as far as the outcomes that we achieved. Nice people, great people on the board. We have family members there and non-family. Amazing people, and it's super smart and really wanted to help us.
Hmm.
I think the problem is that the way the board process was structured was not the most efficient, and it was a very traditional process. I found out later this is how all boards function, or a lot of boards function this way, and it was. But I just did a back of the envelope. After the meeting, I was like, this seemed really this kind of seemed like a waste of my time. And even though I had plenty of time, it was still a waste of time. And so I remember I had a conversation with my dad about it, who at that time was the chairman. I said, Pops, I don't think I was very effective. Is that how all the meetings run? He goes, yeah, generally. And I said, I just did an analysis of how much time it took the team to put together all the information, how much we were paying the board members. I kind of put a time on the family members' time too, just to, fully burden it. And I realized how much the board meeting cost. And then I started asking, I asked my dad, I asked some of the other folks that were involved in the meeting, what was the value that was created from that cost? And there was none. And so when I really looked at it in its purest form, I realized that, the board was a cost center. And why would it be a cost center? That doesn't make any sense. And then I was in a group called Entrepreneurs Organization a long time ago back then. And I went to my former mates who all had, small businesses and talked to them about their boards to see if maybe they were doing something different than what we were doing. And they told me, yeah, this sounds like a normal board meeting. And that just bothered me. And so I wanted to fix our board. So I went through this 2-year process. It was literally 2 years of analyzing the complete board process. And I process mapped it out at that time. By the way, most people don't realize this, but there's about 800 at that time anyway. There was about 800 different individual steps to make that board work. That was the process, right? And from building to running to everything. And so I went through and I readjusted the processes to kind of look at it from two perspectives. What are the processes that really drive enterprise value, and which ones were just like, we're just going through the motions. We're doing what we're supposed to do. Not sure that it's being very effective, but this is what boards do, right? And we were a private company, so we didn't have to necessarily follow the same rules that everybody else did or the traditional rules. This was the light bulb going off in my head. We could have a board to do whatever we wanted it to do because it was our company. And so when I started looking at that, and then I started doing, like, part of my 2-year process was researching where the whole board process came from. That's a whole other story that I won't bore your listeners with. But when I learned what the true essence of a board is, I realized that unfortunately what had happened over time was, and this was, again, this was shortly after Sarbanes and before Frank Dodd, which were two important things that changed how boards, or added more processes to how boards function today that we know today. So this was in between those. And what I realized was the regulations and compliance and a lot of those things had taken away from the true essence of what a board was originally supposed to be. And so what I did is I kind of retooled a board process for us that was going to increase the value of the enterprise so that we could measure it and track it. But on top of that, so that we could literally track it, this was my original thought, which we've now been able to do, was to be able to track it by board member, by board meeting, to actually put probability analytics to how much value is actually being created. And so that's what started it. Now, at that time, I didn't know there was a company there. I just kind of wanted to develop this for my own purposes. And then again, as I was saying about how my brain works, I just got really stuck on it. Like, I wanted to fix it. This was, for me, this was like the juice of building a algorithmic trading system and testing it out and going through all that and then applying capital to it and then proving it, right? I wanted to do the same thing. So I took this whole process map, I rebuilt it. Now I wanted to make sure that it worked and test it out and do all this stuff. So it was just, for me, it was just like, wow, this is really fun. I think for most people, it would be like this.
So in a unique way, right? The algorithmic trading chapter of your life wasn't the most, might have been fruitful financially, maybe not the most fulfilling and kind of meaningful from like what it was doing for the world. The skills that you had learned or maybe refined around efficiency in that chapter of your life, you were able to really apply to how boards were run. And you weren't looking at a board of like, is this just a functioning board with people doing X, Y, Z? But you really kind of, sounds like, broke it down to kind of every piece and said, all right, how do we assemble this in the most efficient way possible to drive the most value beyond the cost of what it takes to put this together?
Yeah. And over time, what I realized was, even with the optimization of the processes and all the things that we do now, look, on paper, every one of our boards for every one of our clients should be running at 100% accuracy and fully optimized, right? There's a whole cog in the wheel that's super critically important and that I had to learn. You were asking, whether this is, my skills around the EQ side have gotten better over the years. I think this was a big driver of that too, because what I quickly realized was I could have the best processes and systems on the planet, but ultimately our boards were filled with people. And those people had different objectives. They had, different experiences. They had different ways of communicating. And so we had to become experts over time. We've had to become somewhat experts at how people engage and collaborate and fit that into our processes as well. So it wasn't just about finding the most optimal processes, because I could do that. And that's fairly simple. What's hard part is, are people actually going to do it? And then getting people to engage with it and making sure that the processes that we built are actually engaging for them.
Yeah. So interesting. So, it's the Yeah, but you also, it sounds like you had to learn or build on. It's like, all right, you might be able to break down every nook and cranny of like how this functions properly, but if I don't get the people side right, like the board's not going to function. So it doesn't really matter if I get the, the math right. Got it. Makes sense. Okay. So one of the things it was kind of going through my mind, and I think a good bridge to how I want to build on this, but when you were, let's just say, scientifically breaking down, the equation of it's interesting, the equation of an effective board. When you were breaking down, all the moving pieces of driving a successful board operation for a company, when you look back on that kind of like deep discovery process that you were doing right at maybe the beginning, what are some things that stood out to you that maybe surprised you the most, or like things that like the more you kind of uncovered, like the more that was kind of like, wow, I didn't quite realize that.
Yeah, I think what surprised me more than anything was the lack of transparency. And I gotta be honest, even today, the lack of transparency at the board level still is and when I say transparency, I don't mean that boards aren't being transparent with information and that kind of stuff. What I mean about transparency is transparency around how they perform. And not just around the people, but around the processes themselves. And what astounded me was in even the most effective businesses in companies, they track and measure returns on everything they put in their business, right? I'm sure you do the same with your business, right? Every successful business, you have a liability section and you have an asset section, right? And whatever you bring into your business is going to fall on one side or the other, right? If you buy a piece of new equipment or you hire a new person, right? There's a cost to the business. And obviously, and that cost has to be offset but we're getting this in return, right? And so if you buy a new piece of equipment, most companies would have figured out that the cost of the equipment is X, and over time, we're going to get Y from it, and that's a return of whatever. And then I started asking people about their boards in the same context, and I would just get blank stares. Like, what's the return on your board? Not who's on it, because when I ask people, even today, when I ask people that question about their boards, I'm like, well, how does your board perform? Describe it for me, right? What's the return that it's generating for you? I usually get a list of people and how impressive their backgrounds are. That's usually what I get. Rather than, our board, the return on our board was, 5X, 10X, 15X, whatever it is, right? Because most boards don't know. They just don't know. Most companies don't know. And that still surprises me to today, because you could ask, and we do this as part of our process, when we bring on a new client that has an existing board, we want to understand how the board's been functioning to this point. And so we ask everybody, and wow, the variances and the differences are crazy from what, maybe a management team member thinks about how their board's adding value to what a board member thinks and how they're adding value. I mean, in a lot of cases, it's night and day. We're speaking two different languages.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing to me that nobody's ever actually thought to do that before. And even if they have, to make actual changes to standardize that process and put some expectations around, this is what we expect. We want this type of return from our board. Not pretty good, not good, even not great, but let's put some actual metrics around what does great mean. When someone says I have a high performing board, I always ask the question, what does that mean? Give me numbers. Yeah. What does high performance mean to you versus maybe to myself or our clients, or what other boards are experiencing, right?
Can I ask a question on this? So if I'm a CEO, I have assembled a board, and what, like from your experience and all the research and the kind of data that you have, what in your eyes, like what are the KPIs that you should be looking at for a successful board, right? Like how do you break that down? How should you be looking at that? Because I think you're right. Like a lot of people do, they put credentialed people on. It's an external thing. It's not, but the internal value, they don't even know how to maybe look at that, right? And so from your perspective, what has been how you break that down, say formulaically, in a way of like, if I'm starting today, here's how I should be, the KPIs and the areas in which I should think about building a strong board.
Good question. What we would first need to define is, what do you want from a board? Like, what are you expecting? What are your expectations? Because that's going to define what type of board you want, and that may define the type of value you can receive. Okay, so I'll just give you an example, right? And I'm not saying there's such thing as a good board or a bad board. There's just whatever board you have is the board you have. You get to choose, right? The board gets to choose how it works, how it functions in a lot of cases in conjunction with management or ownership, and they get to decide, what do we want? And so it really depends on what you want. And so if we just want a board that is going to be there to make sure the wheels don't run off this thing, like we don't run this amazing company that we built, we don't run it off into a ditch somewhere, right? Yep, that's a board. And maybe what your whole point is look, we want them to be overseers of management, and we want them to, from time to time help us think about how we're doing things, but mostly what they're there for is for us to report to them, here's what we're doing, and for them to say, okay, sounds good, keep going that way, or what about this? Or one of my favorite questions that is not actually one of my favorites is, have you thought of this, right? That's one of the worst questions you could ask as a board member. But I hear it a lot, right? And I'm not saying that that's a bad thing necessarily, because maybe in that boardroom, that's all they want. They just want that. And that's okay. If you're getting that, great. But when you start asking about how would I track metrics on return on that, that's kind of hard, because maybe the metrics are just, are we making sure we're not running the company off into a ditch? Right? And so it's an easy evaluation. Well, the company's doing well. We're not running into a ditch. So I guess we're doing okay, right? And the board must be doing what it's supposed to do. That's not how I run my board. And that's not how many of our clients, that's not what they expect from their board. They have a higher level of expectation. For example, in my world, with my board in particular, look, I have a certain rate of, I want a certain rate of return from every single board meeting. In my mind, I wouldn't even wake up to have a board meeting unless it was going to generate at least 4 to 5x from that specific board meeting, the probability that it's going to generate 4 to 5x on the cost of that meeting. In my mind, I don't even know why we would have the meeting. If I can't generate that kind of return from a probability perspective, then maybe we shouldn't have the board. But that's what I expect from my board. For everybody else, it could be very different, right? So the metrics, my point is, the metrics have to go back to, it's not as easy as saying, well, here's this one metric that we can track that states this is a great board. It's actually looking at a number of different comparisons, but I think the most important piece where you get those kind of metrics from is, what do we want from the board? What do we expect from the board? Because maybe your expectations are low enough that it's going to be easy to track, right? But if you want a lot more from your board, which for me, I don't know why I would have a board otherwise. For me, that's what I want. Then that requires a different set of metrics that might be a bit more complicated.
Interesting. Got it. It makes so much sense. It's like almost setting, OKRs or kind of high level strategic goals for your company internally. You do the same thing for your board.
You were going to build a software platform for your company, right? Or you were going to implement a new software platform. You would go through the same exact process.
Yeah.
Right.
So I know part of your business, and I want to get to it, and not immediately, but is helping others get board ready, right, to potentially serve on boards. But we're talking right now about how to make a board work effectively, and I know that's also part of your business. So can you, like, let's just say company in the mid-market space is doing, they're at a place where, they really want to take things to the next level. And they're like, Bob, you know, it's craziness. I don't have time to really kind of think through what's ahead. And I need help. How do you go in and say, hey, look, we're going to make this process so much easier for you to like set this up. So that's like the first part of my question. And the second part of the question is, beyond metrics, what does a CEO need to do to like drive an effective board, right? Once it's in place.
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, let me talk about the word effective, because you said that multiple times. So I'm going to use that word specifically in this sense, right? If you don't, from an effective perspective, what I get what you're saying from an effective perspective is there's return being generated from the board, right? It's not just a reporting board. In other words, it transcends what we would call a traditional governance primary focus, and focuses more on how the board can be a driver or a toolkit for the CEO and management team to utilize to accelerate their path faster than they were going to do otherwise. So that's what so everything I'm going to tell you right now is going to be based with that in mind, okay, that expectation. And so from that perspective, I'll just share with you an actual anecdote, because we do this all the time, but there's one particular company that I think we're about to start a new project with to help them. And this is a good example of what you're describing. So this is a company that 5 years ago was probably doing about 20, 30 million in revenues. And they've essentially doubled every year for the past 4 years. And they're planning on doubling again next year. So they're going to be close to, well, hopefully, in their minds, they're going to be close to 800 million. They don't have a board. This is a founder. This founder's still there. He's the CEO. He runs the show, right? And it's a great business, obviously. He's been wildly successful. He's got a great team, and he's got a great business. For all intents and purposes, you might even question whether he even needs a board.
Right.
He's been successful without one, right? And so the conversations we're having are more along the lines of, okay, how you're already double. How would a board help you either increase that growth rate, or he's talking about growing revenues. What about profitability? Because now you've got a real business. Now you've got a significant enterprise value, potentially. How can the board help in both of those areas? Maybe it's more important to look at the profitability of the business rather than the growth rate of the business. In other words, how do we avoid growing ourselves right out of business?
Right.
And let's put some people around the CEO because look, most CEOs, whatever they're trying to achieve, they don't have experience doing it yet. It hasn't been done yet. That's the beauty of growth, right? Even in my own business, when we launched our software company or our software platform, well, I had never built software before. I had never launched a software platform, let alone built software. So I didn't know what I was doing. Luckily, my board was there to help me think that through. So I didn't have to go and make all these mistakes that I probably absolutely, positively would have made. And I'm not saying we wouldn't have been successful anyway, but probably would have taken a lot longer. So that's how we would look at it for a client like that too, is that most of our clients are really well-run companies. These companies are fantastic. The issue is the next level. And none of us have been there. We want to get there. It's part of our growth plan. How can the board help us achieve that faster, more profitably? increase our enterprise value faster than we were going to do otherwise on our own without the board. And we want to understand that right up front, so then we can help our clients craft the expectations and the metrics that support those expectations, and then ultimately the processes that will support those metrics. And that's what performance is, right? But it's very individualized to each company and what they're trying to do and their expectations. That's how we relate it back to performance. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense to me. What's coming up for me when you're describing that is, okay, sounds like an incredible CEO, founder-led, doubling. You talked about growth. He's never done some of the things he wants to do. He needs to be well-resourced and more efficient. So then my question to you is, okay, you're helping him set this board up, right? How do you, Bob, know who to go? How do you go find the people, right, to go put around him to make sure that he is successful in driving these, objectives?
Good question. Look, this is going to sound crass, but this is just the way I talk. Every jackass at this level thinks they should be on a board. Okay, everybody thinks they're board ready. We talk to board candidates all the time. They're all perfect for that board. Always. Okay. So finding board members is not hard. Finding the right board member to go on your board for the right reason that actually fits, not fit like the way they describe it, but actually has the functional experience that they've done what you're trying to do as a CEO or as a company. That's the hard part. So that, unfortunately, I think where a lot of boards make a mistake is in that first phase, like I described, of not really understanding what they want and being very clear about it, and here's the exact expectations that we have of our board members, right? But once you've done that, then objectively analyzing how each candidate would perform from a probability perspective in that environment to meet those expectations, right? That's the hard part. And most people do it highly subjectively, where it's like, it's like I equate it to this. I'm an Uber entrepreneur too. And look, if you were, I'm from LA originally, right? If you were to take me to a Dodger game, buy me a Dodger dog and a beer, I would think you were probably the smartest person on the planet, and you should definitely be on my board. But by the way, I probably have 100 other boards you should be on. Look, literally, it's one of those things where I've heard people tell me this. I've got this I've heard people tell me I've got this great way to choose board members. We don't need all of ABA's, algorithms and predictive analytics. We have a great way of doing it. Oh, how you do it? I always ask them, how do you do it? And I get some format of, well, if I'd have a beer with them, I meet them, if I like them and I think I would have a beer with them, then they'd probably be a good fit on my board. It's like, really? That's it? You'd have a bunch of drunks on your board? I mean, if that's what you want, great, good for you, right? But I don't know if that's, that's highly subjective. What if they don't work out? Are you going to fire them? Because you should, right? Do you want to? Do you want to have that conversation? Or do you want to do the term limit thing where, well, put them on a term limit in 3 years, I just won't re-up their term. We're all big kids, right? Can't have a hard conversation with a board member. Like, look, this is where I need you to add value. If you can't add value, maybe this isn't the right board for you, right? So, finding the candidates isn't the hard part. The hard part is making sure from an objective analysis that you can prove that they're actually going to create the type of value that you expect and want from them in a very short amount of time. That's
Yeah. Wow. I love the analogy. I mean, I think what you're saying is super interesting, right? Like, you're not just gonna like throw people onto this great adventure that you need to go down to succeed on, but like if they're not prepared and equipped with the right tool set to make you the most effective, even if they have certain, degrees of experience, like they need to be board ready. So then I think the question then is, all right, so you have the formula down of how to run an effective board and find the people, and a lot of people could qualify, but there's a whole nother side to this, which is I need to be board ready. I need to, if I'm going to take responsibility around the direction of someone else's company, like it comes with weight and gravity of responsibility. So tell us, you help train people on the board readiness side of things. So what's it take to be board ready? Tell us about the process. I'm super intrigued.
sure. Well, again, I'm going to go back to this caveat of, I'm assuming you mean to be what we would call the highest performing within a what we would call high impact board, which is not reporting based or bias, but more strategic bias. Okay, so
Right.
I'm going to give you that's the important caveat, because that's how we built our our board leadership program, which is very different than maybe some other programs out there that are more governance focused. And if you're going to go that governance route, then those will probably be better programs. I think the biggest, again, going back to expectations and everything else, I think people need to do this too. Board candidates need to do this too. What do I want? Why am I doing this? Why do I want to be on a board? And be very open and honest. I mean, I do talk to people from time to time, and you can tell right away the reason. Because, by the way, we ask that question every single time. Why do you want to be on boards, and what types of boards do you want to be on? Those are our key questions. The why do you want to be on boards one, I see people struggle with this sometimes, where what they really want is they think they're going to make a lot of money doing this, which I hate to burst anybody's bubble. You're not. Given the amount of time and the amount of expertise that you're going to be required to provide, and you really look at all these things, even if it's an efficient system like ours, even though we pay, I think from an hourly perspective and from all of our data that shows that we pay some of the highest rates to our board members, because our system's so efficient, it actually doesn't add up. That it's not going to be financially impactful to anybody, more than likely, right? But I think it's really important for people to understand, if you're just doing this for money, go for it, right? Just be very upfront with that. Look, I'm doing this for money. Okay. It's your board journey. It's not mine, right? I don't necessarily know that I would do it for the money, but some people do. That's okay, right? It's again, it's their board journey. I do talk to other people that are uber successful, want to go down this path. They could care less about the money, okay? But here's an important factor that I don't think they think of enough. They have plenty of money. What they don't have is plenty of time. None of us really do, right? But for those people in particular, they tend to be more focused on, look, if you pay me a ton of money but waste my time, that was not a good use of a resource that I can never ever get back. And so in those cases, you need to look at things differently than the people that are thinking, hey, I'm doing this for money. So first and foremost is thinking through the expectation. That's really critical. Then applying those principles to, okay, now what types of boards will be a fit for me? That's an important distinction, because one of the other things that we see people make the biggest mistake on is they come in thinking more along the lines of, how can I fit into a boardroom? Right? I get that question a lot from people. Well, here's my background. What kind of boards do you think I'd be a fit for? Wrong question. Wrong question. Okay. That is not a board candidate's job to figure out what boards they're going to be a fit for. You should be thinking about is what board characteristics are going to fit with me. Right? Maybe it's money. maybe that's what I care about. So I'm going to go after the boards that pay the most. Maybe that's the thing. Okay, great. Good. Now we've eliminated a lot of board opportunities, right? Because this is all about a process of elimination.
Sure.
You can only go on so many boards, right? Even the quote unquote professional board members, I hate that word. I can't tell you how much I hate that word. I wish people would stop using it. I don't see it as much as I used to see it, thank God. But I still see people say, I want to retire and be a professional board member. Good luck with that. Okay.
Got it.
For certain types of boards, that's going to work well. In our boardrooms, never. Don't even bother. It's not going to work. But I think that's the really important part is people need to stop, board candidates especially, need to stop thinking about boards as this kind of monolithic thing. They're all very, very different. Once you've been on one board, you've been on one board. Right? Because the next one you go on is going to run different. It's going to have a different culture. It's going to have a different process. It's going to have different people. All that's going to affect the outcomes. And so what kind of outcomes do you want to drive?
Yeah.
Really thinking that through first and making sure that the board that you're going to go on from a fit perspective fits that profile.
Yeah. Interesting. Very, very interesting. Bob, we could go on. I feel like we could talk for hours, which means I need to come pay you a visit in Denver. So we will do that. But Bob, this has been super stimulating. I'm super excited to continue the dialogue. Thanks for the wisdom, the knowledge. It was so insightful and excited to share this. And thanks for the time. Where can people find you, reach out to you, get in front of you?
Our websites are great, boardology.com and advisoryboardarchitects.com. That has a lot of information about our companies. And then you can always find me on LinkedIn as well. So just feel free to reach out if there's any questions about boards, your board path, your board journey, whatever it is. We love to have these conversations.
Amazing. All right. Well, thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Bryan. It's really great being on your show.
That was Bob, a thoughtful, curious mind with a story that reminds us how the metrics we chase only matter when they are aligned with what really moves us. If his journey spoke to you, share this episode with someone navigating a turning point of their own. These episodes have a way of finding the right ears at the right time.